Shabbat shalom. Please be seated. Now, often we have another member of the Garden Swartz family here giving the sermon, but today we have the blessing that Sam Garden Swartz, who grew up right here at Temple Emanuel, will be delivering our words. Sam.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. As we say in Brooklyn on Pride Shabbat, chag sameach. I am so jazzed to be here this Shabbat as Temple Emanuel's gay in residence. So growing up at Emanuel and Schechter and Ramah, I was often asked a question that might be familiar to you all, which is, are you an American Jew or a Jewish American? Now, I have to say, upon 20 years of reflection, it's a really weird question, especially to ask a fifth grader. The problem with the question is that it presumes that my Jewish identity and my American identity are separate. But in reality, they're related and they build on each other and amplify each other. For example, core to my experience of being a Jew is a belief in egalitarianism. And that's really only possible in America with its multiple mainstream movements of progressive Judaism. Similarly, core to my experience of being an American is the balance of having the privileges of being a white man with the marginalization of being a religious minority in a Christian country. My experience of being an American and my experience of being a Jew are unique to the experience of being a Jew in America. When I came out a decade ago, I realized that my Judaism is also deeply related to my queerness in the same way. We often talk about Judaism and queerness as opposing, and how Jewish communities aren't accepting of queer Jews. And there's a lot of truth in that, and a lot of work that we need to do in places like this shul, especially in being more welcoming to trans Jews and queer Jews of color. But stopping the conversation there is like asking a fifth grader if they're a Jewish American or an American Jew. It doesn't allow us to celebrate all of the ways that these identities can work together and create a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. So this morning, I want to share my personal story of how my queerness and my Judaism build on each other to create me. My goal is to show how deeply intertwined Judaism and queerness can be for those of us doubly lucky to be queer Jews. And in the process, I hope to give you all a framework for how you can harness your Judaism to either deepen your pride or your allyship to the queer community. So first, I want to share an example of how my Judaism has helped me deepen my queerness. I first thought I might be gay the summer after my junior year in college, but it took me another 3 years to come out. And those were 3 years in which I continued to strive towards straightness, from consciously straightening my wrist while I walked upstairs, to choosing to not listen to Broadway musicals while I ran because I was worried that would seem too gay, to going on many, many dates with women, as you might expect, very, very few second dates. And in my head, I increasingly knew that I was gay, but my heart couldn't quite get there. That really started to change for me when one of my best friends gave me a biography of Harvey Milk for my birthday. And as I read, I suddenly remembered this crazy thing that we used to do. Jewish text study. Jews love text study. My dad loves text study. When we dive into a rich tradition of texts, we encounter our history, and it's a way to get more comfortable with uncomfortable ideas. So I finished that biography of Harvey Milk, and I went on a multi-year queer reading spree. I kept reading, and I learned about how contemporary Jewish identity and queer identity both started to be formed in late 19th century Germany at the same time, both by German nationalists as counter, as wrong in response to what good German identity looked like. I kept reading, and I learned that Gilbert Baker, the creator of the Pride flag, chose the rainbow as a symbol after Harvey Milk's murder, as a symbol of hope in reference to Noah's Ark. I kept reading, and I learned about the incredible contributions of so many queer Jewish activists, from Larry Kramer to Tony Kushner to Edie Windsor. As I read, I was able to place myself more and more in an intergenerational queer community and ultimately gain the comfort and confidence I needed to come out. Second, I want to share an example of how my queerness has helped me deepen my Jewish identity. When I first moved to the city a decade ago, I had a really hard time finding a Jewish community that felt like home. Of course, this is mostly because I was so spoiled growing up at Temple Emanuel, at least from a cantorial perspective. And after I came out, I was able to find queer Jewish communities in the city that I really loved. So I found Minions in Brooklyn, where it seems like the majority of people davening are queer. I found Congregation Beth Simchat Torah, one of the first queer synagogues in the country that's in Chelsea, where they pray Hallel on Pride Shabbat, and one of their most common refrains is Evan Masu Habonim Haital Rosh Pina. The stone that was spurned by the builders has become the cornerstone of the building. I marched with hundreds of queer Jews at the 50th anniversary of Stonewall at the Pride March in New York, and before we set out, a rabbi blew the shofar, summoning the gravitas of Elul to a moment of equal emotional intensity. My queerness is what enabled me to find that Jewish community that I'd been looking for in the city. And third, I want to share something that I think the queer community can learn from Jewish history. The Jewish community and queer community both face incredible amounts of discrimination. And we're currently seeing a terrifying rise in state-sanctioned anti-queer hatred. We're seeing legislators pass bathroom use restrictions, don't gay say laws, restrictions on medical care, ordinances banning drag performances, and ordinances banning pride parades in cities. The trans community in particular is under attack. In the first half of 2023, we've seen 82 anti-trans bills passed in 22 states. Let that sink in. 82 bills passed, not proposed, but passed. Those are bills on the books. This bigotry has a very material impact. The trans community experiences violence at rates 4 times higher than the non-trans community, and many queer individuals suffer from anxiety and depression that form very young in the closet and last until later in life. What can the Jewish community, with its long history of fighting anti-Semitism, share with the queer community? Over 120 years ago, in 1893, Achad Ha'am, the great Jewish thinker, reflected on the blood libel. And he asked the question, what does it mean when the whole world thinks something as patently absurd as that Jews use blood in matzah? And his response was that the blood libel taught Jews to resist internalizing the negative stereotypes we hear about ourselves. He wrote, knowing that the whole world hates the Jews, can we still say that the world is wrong and that Jews are right? Certainly we can, and blood libels prove it. The Jewish community has learned to have a strong sense of self, and not to let our haters define us. The queer community is experiencing a modern-day blood libel. Prominent political candidates are painting dangerous boogeyman pictures of the trans community as rapists and pedophiles and groomers. And I want to be incredibly clear. There's as much truth in these accusations as there is that you ate baby blood in your matzah at your last Seder. But these accusations are given prime time on news networks and in legislative halls and are being turned into laws. What would it mean for the queer community to embrace Achad Ha'am's lesson? What would it mean for the queer community to know that powerful people in this country can say lies about you, but that doesn't make them true? We must fight the policies, and we must stop the violence, and we must continue to believe that our community is worth more than these legislators say it is. Now, just like Jews cannot fight anti-Semitism on our own, the queer community cannot fight anti-queer legislation on our own. I shared 3 examples of how my Judaism helps me deepen my queerness. This Pride, I encourage you to think about how your Judaism can deepen your allyship to the queer community or help you take pride in your queerness if you are also lucky enough to be a queer Jew. Temple Emanuel has 7 gates, and each of them provide a wonderful entry point. Do you enter through the gate of social action? Consider joining a phone bank against an upcoming bill. Do you join through the gate of learning? Consider picking up a memoir by a queer author like Elliot Page or Janet Mock or Abby Stein to learn more about their experience. Do you prefer the gate of community? I encourage you to plan a program at Emanuel that centers trans Jews and queer Jews of color. I especially encourage you to focus your efforts on allyship of the trans community. We have seen incredible advances in my life for the rights of gays like me. It is really incredible that I can get married. My mom is really excited about it. But we still live in a time of great legal and physical danger for many trans members of our community. Pride is not about love is love. Pride is about keeping all queer individuals alive. This month, how can your Judaism help you deepen your queer identity or your allyship to the queer community? Shabbat shalom and chag sameach.